Hello and welcome to today's class. Today we will be starting looking at international relations as part of the examination for which you have been preparing now for a reasonable period of time. So any subject, when you start studying, now you would have an idea of studying a wide variety of subjects hopefully. Please understand every subject has some of its own internal logic from the perspective of how is it located in the examination. And second thing that you should understand is there is lot to know in any subject. You can devote your life to any one subject, and even after spending lifetime in a subject, there may be areas which would still remain to be known. All right, so you should always know why are you looking at a particular subject and what are you aiming to gain from it. So from the perspective of this examination, always understand that you are just trying to understand or trying to study or trying to read any subject from the perspective of writing an examination and gathering information and techniques which would be useful throughout the examination process, ultimately leading to your success. All right, so that focus should always be there. Secondly, each of the subjects, directly or indirectly, have a certain weightage in the examination. There cannot be a formula decided for that. That is not required also. But then you need to understand that there is always a calculation of return on investment. All right, so you should not be worried about each and every topic, each and every subject equally. That's what I would say smartly. That means you have to prioritize. So hopefully you will be able to prioritize. And thirdly, please understand that when you are in the process of preparation, as you spend some time in the preparation, looking at the question paper, looking at discussions, attending classes, you start developing your own understanding of the examination over and above your own perspective that you may have had from any number of sources before you started preparing for the examination. All right, so you are understanding the examination with each and every step. So don't let go of your own understanding, because if you are in search of a ready-made formula, well, even after many years, I can't say that there is a formula actually to this examination. So the only thing that matters is that you have to understand the process, and to the best of your understanding you have to follow the process. All right, there is no shortcut. Following the process would be required. So when we look at any subject, as I've already told you, that we would look at it from the perspective of the examination. We should start looking at it from the perspective of the examination. It has both good aspects and bad aspects. But then ultimately the immediate goal is how to have a footing from the perspective of the examination, right? So looking at international relations, you should be aware of the fact that this particular subject is a small but important part of the examination scheme, right? Small in the sense that if you look at the preliminary examination syllabus, you will not find international relations mentioned directly into it. If you look at the question paper, you can identify 3 to 4 or 5 to 6 in a good year questions which are directly or indirectly related with, inspired by international relations. And then in the mains examination, it is the general studies paper 2, wherein 4 questions worth 50 marks consistently are asked from international relations. At times, essay related topics are also, international relations related topics are also found in essay or essay topics. So there again indirectly it may help you. And then in the personality test round, your awareness of different subject matters is helpful, but I mean, I can see a lot of chats. For example, the first thing, how many classes for IR, I'm assuming. So the answer to that is we try to do it in 15 classes or so. If you want lesser number of classes also, please let me know. That always would depend on where you stand. I don't know any of you personally, and we don't have the good fortune of being in a offline class setting, interacting with each other. So that always depends. 15 lectures, depending on the speed, the progress, add some more to it, right? If that is the primary concern that you have. Tushar Goyal, I am answering your question on the chat. Now, where was I? I was trying to bring your attention to the fact that in the personality test round also, IR is an important area from where questions of interest may be asked. So that is how this subject helps you. But by any means, it is not a subject which is going to be decisive. If you don't understand it or master it, you are going to miss out on a lot. I can't say that, I won't say that. So always take this subject with a pinch of salt. And some people are interested in international relations, so they have an interest, so they would like to read. But please understand your interest, the areas of international relations that you may be interested in, and the questions to which you need to write an answer may not match always. Alright, so you may have great expectations from international relations, but ultimately you write those regular boring answers in the examination. It is not about thinking out of the box, because as you could see, thinking out of the box, even the best of minds, certainly in the government, seem to have failed right now. So while writing the examination, that is not an expectation from you that you would be able to think out of box, provide a solution. What is expected from you is that you are aware of various tangents of solutions, arguments, ideas that generally are talked about, that generally people write about in the newspaper. So you are generally aware of various elements of debates which are important for public life in India. So that's the perspective that you should always have. Now this is a generalist examination. It does not require, to the best of my understanding, any degree of specialization. It does not require any degree of specialization. The difficulty of this examination comes from the fact that a large number of students are writing this examination, so that competition factor. And the second thing is its syllabus is vast, boundless. Virtually any and everything under the sun is a subject matter of this examination. Alright, but again, that cannot be the basis of your preparation, thinking that, oh, I have to read so much, or I have to compete with 900,000 people. First of all, you have made your mind to write this examination. You have your own reasons and motivations to write this examination. Always remember them. Nobody forced you to do this. Neither is it by any means the best job, depending on what definition of best that you use. You have made a choice for your own reasons, and that should be good enough to motivate you. Alright. And second thing is, even though the subject matter is unbound, you are not supposed to be an expert. It is a generalist examination by nature for this reason, right? Because you are supposed to read so much that any degree of expertise certainly can't be expected. So that's something that basically sets up the challenge as well as provides the solution. Now going forward, there can be two ways in which you can look at the examination or any subject matter, for that matter, international relations. One way is to always look at the difficulty. Another way is to look at, take difficulty as a given, that in this kind of an examination difficulty would be there, but then what is it that may work out in your favor? What is it that may mentally support you? What is it that can provide you a relative advantage. All right, and one of the things that should come up, the first is your willingness to do hard work, but also your willingness to revise, change course, and learn from your own mistakes. And of course, mistakes of others, but your own mistakes, because it's a long process. You would be making mistakes. So when you start writing, you would not be writing perfect answers. Many students are worried, how should I write an answer? First start writing. Have you been writing? How long has it been since you wrote? So try and answer these questions rather than thinking that I have to write the best answer, or I have to, there is another buzzword these days, value addition. First have the basics and then you can add value to it. Without the basics, any amount of value added would not make a difference. So don't chase after special facts. It is a boring examination. Try and make it interesting for yourself. It is a boring examination, long and full of repetitions, right? A lot of creativity perhaps is not part of the examination. Many of you may think that a lot of creativity is a part of it, but again, a lot of creativity is also not part of the examination. So then through the process, you have to understand the logic of the examination. It is ultimately an examination. Let's move forward. Let's start looking at international relations from the first point where anyone should start. Look at international relations as India's relations. India's relations with whom? India being a state, its relations with other states. But we also know yes, some of you are from 2022 batch also. That is what Mansi says, but what difference would it make? Some of you are from 2022 batch. That also means that the basics that you have to learn, and the basics are only two things: basic numeracy and basic grasp over language. These are the two things that you have learned from school. So don't think that there is something that you would learn specially when you have completed graduation, right? I'm assuming that many of you may be in graduation, right? Not even have completed graduation. But then the basic that is required is, we haven't done PT 365. Please stop this chat right now. I don't understand what is happening. We haven't done PT 365. Please allow me to run the class. Allow me to run the class, and if you follow, you will learn. All right, please understand that. So what I was talking about is this, that you already have the basics. You already have the basics. All right, basics of language and basics of patterns and basics of numeracy. Beyond that, it's your decision to write this examination, right? In any case, in 15 classes, I won't be able to teach you everything. But again, as I've been saying, that look at the solutions. You are studying only for an examination. You are not studying to become the most intelligent person in the world. Don't have those kind of expectations and goals. Knowledge gathering is a lifelong exercise. I will answer all of these questions. I hope somebody else also has answered. If this is your first lecture also, just follow me. I can see some of the questions. 2024, the first attempt. Well, 2024 is far away. Let's survive 2021. So first think about survival. What else you should be doing? You should be making sure that you are safe, people in your surrounding are safe, and then you should be reading whatever you have right now. Rather than going anywhere else, looking at special material, read whatever you have. Start having organized work, right? As I had said, either two qualities that would be required are organized work, hard work, and the ability to take a stock, right? 2024 is far, far away, far, far away. Don't think that long into the future. Right now, read the NCERTs. Right now, read the newspaper. Feel like a fool if you have to. Now, if you have to feel that you don't understand anything, this is the time to feel that. Alright? One of the good advantages with being young is that you have a lot of scope of making mistakes. The moment you start thinking that you have grown up to not make mistakes, well, you would stop learning. So if you are young, 2024 is far away, keep on learning, right? And rather than these anxious questions right at the beginning, let's go into the subject. Right, so international relations. Now, international relations is about relations among nations, all right, countries, states like India, right. Now, for being a state, those of you who may not have any background whatsoever, for being a state, there are few attributes that a community should have, right. A simple definition of being a state would be a territorially bounded political community, right, with the attribute of sovereignty. So a state is a political entity which has a defined territory, land, defined population, setup of government, and also external recognition by others, right. So India is a state. United States is a state, as we call it. Japan is a state, Pakistan, etc., in the parlance of international relations. That's what we mean by state, the idea of state, right? Not like domestic politics, center and state. So that is the meaning of state when we start talking about international relations. So India's relations with other similar actors, states like it, is the subject matter of international relations. First thing that you should do while looking at international relations from the perspective of UPSC is look at international relations as India's relations. Put India at the center. So first order of priority is there may be a lot of things happening around the globe, but the important thing is any development that is important for India, or any development in which India is directly involved, or any development which impacts India's interests, right? So that's something that should automatically become your priority. Read a lot, but focus on India's relations, India's interests. Now the second thing that you should try and remember is that just as the government has domestic policy to run the domestic economy, or a sector like agriculture or the area of defense, to deal with external aspects of India's interest, India also has a dedicated policy or a Ministry of External Affairs, and the foreign policy largely is the ambit of Ministry of External Affairs, right? Now, what is a foreign policy? Should be the question that you should ask, because international relations is about India's relations with other states. It is also about then a sort of broader policy that India has in the context of its external relations, right, which can be called foreign policy. If you have to define foreign policy, it can be done very simply. And again, second thing that I would like to tell you is this, that try and keep things simple in this examination. Try and keep things simple in this examination. Any degree of expertise is not being sought, right? Working definitions that help you writing things shortly, that is something that you should develop a habit of. You may not have a complete understanding of any of the subjects that you study, even after you have succeeded in this examination, right? But then you have a working understanding of subjects to clear the examination. Rest of the understanding, would come while you are training as a foreign service officer or as an administrative service officer, or as you grow up and look at the world, right? Read more, apply yourself. So foreign policy is general objectives that guide activities and relationships of one state in its interactions with other states, right? That's the definition of foreign policy. What does it mean? General objectives, goals of a state. When it comes to relations with others, what is it that a state wants vis-a-vis other states or from other states, right? So foreign policy is general objectives that guide activities and relationships of one state in its interactions with other states. So that's one understanding that we should have, that it is about India's interaction with others, other states like India. Now, international relations is not only about states. So now, right now, what are the most important entities that you are hearing about? We have heard about Pfizer, we have heard about Moderna, we have heard about the Serum Institute, we have heard about the AstraZeneca. Now what are these? These are large multinational corporations with a worth of billions of dollars. So both from the perspective of capital, from the perspective of technology, these entities are important and they can be called multinational corporations, all right? Large private for-profit corporations which have operations across the globe. So the government is not only dealing with foreign governments, but it may also have to deal with these larger corporations, right? And then from time to time, events like terrorism are in news, that terrorism poses a threat to international security as well as India's national security. Now terrorists are also in this context non-state actors, right? Or there are organizations like Greenpeace or Amnesty International which are advocacy groups which petition the government or have reports which talk about the conduct of the government in certain contexts. These are also not state entities. So these are non-state actors. So foreign policy these days increasingly is also about engagement with non-state actors, primarily state actors, but also with non-state actors. Now, when we are interacting, what is happening is pursuit of national interests is the core goal of a foreign policy, core function of a foreign policy. That foreign policy should be pursuing national interests. What is good for the country, right? So that's basically what you should be trying to understand by foreign policy. Again, completely understanding it, exactly how it happens, it's a complex and long process. It would take time for you to understand it exactly. But right now you at least understand that if a country has interest like safeguarding its population, it may not be able to do all that it can on its own, all right? All that it wants on its own. It would require external cooperation, as has been made amply evident by the years 2020 and 2021 in the context of COVID-19. Now, the foreign policy is also a statement of ends and means of a state, right? The goals of a state, which can be broadly said to be national interests. But what are the means that a state has? Now, you may want India to do a lot of things, but then at any given point in time, at least officially speaking, there are only three ways of doing things. Either a country has diplomatic tools, Ministry of External Affairs, foreign service officers, engaging with their counterparts externally, talks, negotiations, agreements, or a country has economic tools. A country can provide aid to another country. A country if it is a developed country, rich country, can provide investments or can provide technology to other countries, and that basically extends the influence of that country. Or thirdly, a country has military tools. Every country has some sort of a defense force, a military, air force, navy. Now, the purpose of these bodies is to defend the interest of their country in the context of external aggression, wars. A country can threaten another country with the arms that it has, with the size of military that it has, or how strong it is. Or a country can send its military to another country in the times of, let's say, a humanitarian crisis to help. So, at any point in time, what options any country has can be thought of in three forms. What are the diplomatic options? What are the military options? What are the economic options? All right, broadly, three tools. So, statement of ends and means, ways that a country has to achieve its goals. And please understand, just in life, just in international relations, foreign policy also, just as in life, there is a theoretical aspect, theory of things, ideal of things, and there is a practice of things. And just as in life, so in international relations also, you will find a lot of mismatch between theory, ideal, and practice. So you should not always expect that ideal should meet the real, but that's the goal. That should be the case, that we should have an ideal form of behavior, but that does not always happen, right? So don't be surprised if countries have double standards. Vaibhav, will it be dictated again? This is a habit that you have developed. Are you able to follow my voice? Are you able to listen to me? Are you able to read this? These are 4 lines that I am trying to explain. The PPTs would be uploaded to your portal. If you are only worried about material, Vaibhav, they would be uploaded. And to the class coordinator, please inform the students for these kind of queries that I am speaking slow. If you have to consider this as dictation, please consider this as dictation. If you are comfortable noting these 3 lines down, if that is your primary interest, please do that. If you are comfortable following me, listening to me, there may be various groups of students, please do that. You are free to do that. From my end, whatever material that I am using, I am going to share it with you, right? So you are not, it's not that you are going to be left out with anything. So whatever you would like to do comfortably, do it, please. This is the first lecture. In the first lecture itself, I am not going to ask you that write this thing, this is going to come in the examination. I would like you to think of yourself as a thinking individual who has the ability to think and not only follow dictation or guidance. Secondly, there is no use of writing something right now in a subject like international relations, because 6 months from now, the things would not be the same. All right, please understand this. Everything that is Aman Tandon, Aman, have patience. Have patience. Towards the end of this, list of books, list of sources, for the best of your understanding, I would be providing. Please understand, if you are new, meaning if you have not done subjects like polity, subjects like world history, subjects like economy, there would be a certain degree of discomfort or unease. That's natural. All right. Even if you have done those subjects, you would be able to understand everything is not guaranteed. Please understand that. Please be comfortable with that discomfort. All right. I hope you have understood so far that first thing that I did in the class was I shared my views on the examination, not universal gyan or knowledge that this is how it happens. What I feel the examination requires, right? That's one input that goes into your preparation. Now you have the right to choose from what I have said, whether my suggestions work for you or not. Second thing that I have done is, after giving you a larger idea of the examination and the idea of how I look at the subject and how the subject should be looked at, I've started with the smallest part of understanding of foreign policy, right? So three things that we had to understand was, foreign policy is the policy of a state in its relations with other countries, external relations. It is vitally linked with the objectives, national interests of a state, goals of a state. To achieve these goals, a state has diplomatic, military or economic means. I hope you understood it. I hope you are able to follow me. I just hope that. And that is what our brain does. Rather than concentrating on what is right now, right here, right in front of you, your brain would tell you that there are other things which are important. Whether I should be writing this or not, whether am I going to miss this out, fear of missing out. What would happen 2 years from now? What would happen 1 month from now? What would happen 6 days from now, 7 days from now? That is what constantly your brain would keep doing with you, if you allow it to. At every stage, you have only one resource available to you, the current moment, what you are doing right now. So hopefully you are able to follow me. So now we understand what a foreign policy is. Now if you look at national interest simply, and now I'll be fast because I think I was trying to be slow. While I'm slow, I can see a lot of chat and a lot of questions which are not relevant. So let's reach to the subject matter. All right. All the PPTs that are here would be provided to you. Now, national interests are ends of states. Ends meaning goals. To many of you, I would also advise having a dictionary at hand, right? Many a times it's simply a function of language, right? The difficulty, discomfort, etc. So having a dictionary at hand is not a bad practice at all. The biggest of lawyers, the people who generally have to deal with language, also have a thesaurus, a dictionary on their tables, all right? So ends of state, national interest. Now when we say ends of states, goals of states, why does a state exist? This is in our history a right moment to ask this question. Many of us are asking this question also. So goals on which there is a broad political consensus in a country, broad political consensus, not particular questions, but broadly what is the interest of a state. And broadly speaking, the specifics may change, right? But broadly speaking, there are three prominent components of national interest. One is security, that a state exists to secure its people, secure the territory. All right. Prosperity, a state exists to ensure the prosperity, economic well-being of its people, economic development, right? And status. So after you have survived, after you have achieved prosperity, what would you like to have in life? You would like to have a status, recognition. It enables you to enhance your security, it enables you to enhance your prosperity. That is basically status, identity, right? Let's take each of the example. How are these a state's goal? Look at the constitution. The first part talks about territory, all right? Defined by the constitution, the basic law, fundamental law of the land. And then the words integrity, unity are mentioned often in the constitution itself, right? Important element of political discourse. India's borders, relations with neighbors has an important element of security, right? After having fought so many wars, we realize that military preparedness is required. So security is always an important aspect of a country's consideration domestically as well as in its relations with others. Prosperity, most of our important partners, right? Who are our important partners? United States or European Union or Japan. Now they are either our largest trade partners, potentially large trade partners, largest markets in the world, all right? And we expect that by trade, our economy grows, and the growth in economy then uplifts the entirety of the population. And that is at least theoretically the idea. And then we also would like to have foreign direct investment, FDI, investors. Investment can only be made by countries or corporations which have surplus capital. All right. And status. Our engagements with countries is also based on the fact that A, our preeminence in South Asia is acknowledged, accepted. Our importance in Asia is acknowledged, accepted. And our centrality in the Indian Ocean is acknowledged and accepted. And this basically also help us in maintaining our security and our prosperity. All right, image. And then we can also see that we seek the membership of international organizations. For example, one of the prominent aims of India's foreign policy in the last few decades has been achieving the permanent membership of the Security Council, all right, United Nations Security Council. That means a seat at the high table, a seat at an organization which is considered to be important in maintaining, upholding international peace and security. All right. So basically what we learned from this is national interests. Whenever anybody uses the term national interest, you would understand it is talking about the ends, goals of a state, the goals of a state on which there is broad political consensus, and broadly it is ensuring the security of people and territory, ensuring the prosperity and ensuring the status, acknowledgement of the status. That is something that a state strives for when it pursues its foreign policy. Now let's move forward. Let's look at the determinants of foreign policy. How is it that we have some choices, we can do certain things, we can't do certain things? So then there are certain fundamental important facets of our being that are unchangeable. All right. So as an individuals, where were we born? In which family were we born? Which groups were we born? Have a bearing on, I'm not saying it completely determines who we are, but have a bearing on who we are and what we achieve in life. All right. Or how comfortably we achieve things in life, in other words. So similarly, a country's foreign policy would be determined by its geography, right? So if a country has greater focus on ocean, it means either the country greatly depends on oceanic trade or energy resources, or that particular country is a coastal country or an island nation. All right. A landlocked country would not have a significant naval force or naval policy. Similarly, focus on rivers is an important part of either ensuring economic prosperity or ensuring the security, livelihood of people, right? Look at in the case of the recurrent floods in the river basins we share with Nepal, all right? Or the concerns regarding our rights on water in Brahmaputra. Brahmaputra is a transboundary river, flows from China. Or Indus Water Treaty with Pakistan. Now we cannot change our geography. We are located where we are. India's coastline more than 7,500 kilometers. India's land borders are also close to nearly 9,000 kilometers. All right. Both of these means that geography plays an important role in our foreign policy. All right. And again, on this part, you don't need to apply your brain a lot. All right. Now, just understand, acknowledge that geography plays an important role in who we are, what we do, history of a country, or ideology of a country, or economic factors. These are some of the domestic factors that have a significant bearing on what kind of foreign policy a country can have. History. By history, by ideology, we can look at A, how often our political leaders refer to Mahatma Gandhi or Gautam Buddha from different ideological strands, or the idea of Buddhism is seen as an important tool of engagement with other countries where there is a large following of Buddhism. So then when we say India's default position on any issue is that the issue should be resolved through peaceful negotiations, all right? We always advocate peace. And that is something that we have learned from our history, our culture. The ideology of Indian freedom struggle, which is basically largely acknowledged to be based on. You may have different views, you may have read something else, you can put a counterpoint, but that's not the point. But widely acknowledged fact is that the ideology of India's freedom struggle was based on a certain idea of mass mobilization, which had non-violence, the Gandhian strategy at the very core of it. So when India became independent again, those values, those ideological strands would be a part of our foreign policy. Who we are, our identity has been a part of our foreign policy. Economy, who we are economically always has an impact on our foreign policy. So an independent India in 1948 could not have had a very expansionist foreign policy because our primary problem was that our industry was completely destroyed. The industrial base, the agrarian economy in India for the 200 years of colonial rule of the Britishers was completely destroyed. And we were dependent even on food grains, even for food grains on others. So we cannot have had the expansive nuclear program or an armament program to begin with. Today, India is on the path of defense modernization, defense procurement, defense indigenization. Because if we don't count 2020 and 2021, these are two of the important years, the impact of which we will know only much later. We will keep on feeling till much later. But India from 1948 to 2019 is a different India, acknowledged as one of the rising economies in the world, aided by the fact that we have had significant years of economic growth. Size of the economy expanded, India's trade expanded over the last 2.5 decades. So today's India has different goals. So for example, today's India would like to be much more open. Today's India would like to be welcoming to foreign direct investment much more as compared to earlier. Right? Today, India's friends are diverse. So that's because India is in a transition, right? From a poor country, developing country, to still remaining a developing country, but in a way moving towards the middle income status, which is still far away. Whether there would be 5 trillion economy and when it would be, we don't know. But certainly things have changed. So priorities do change in foreign policy. Economy also provides you the strength to pursue certain kind of goals, right? Buy certain kind of equipments. And then we can also see that domestic factors, how cohesive we are. Are we being impacted by a bad monsoon, right? Are there social upheavals in the country? What is the extent of education in India? What is the extent of skilling in India? All these factors would aid the factors such as economy or variables which would then impact our foreign policy also, right? A country cannot be seen to be playing a major role externally if it is internally failing. International factors meaning what is the international scenario like? So suppose, imagine an India of 1945. Most important international factor is the Second World War that is going on. Even more important is that India is ruled by a colonial power, Britain. So coming out of that, what you would see in India's foreign policy is opposition to colonialism, because that is the experience that we have had. We didn't want our decisions important for Indians to be taken in London. We wanted them to be taken in Delhi by an elected, accountable government. So we opposed colonialism. Based on that experience externally, for the first 1.5 decades, we played an important role in actively promoting decolonization, right? End of colonialism. And the second important reality as India became independent was this competition between two important, large, powerful countries, United States and USSR. Now this scenario also meant that the world would remain unstable. So what did India advocate? India advocated non-alignment. India advocated abjuring force as a tools in international relations, right? Ideally. Why? Because India wants to secure its own path, which it views largely through maintaining equidistance from the power blocks. All right. So international factors, whether there is a war going on right now, travel bans or the difficulty of physical diplomatic meetings, all of them in a way influence India's foreign policy. All of them in a way shape India's outcomes, determinants of foreign policy, right? Now, tools of foreign policy, we have already seen, we have already talked about diplomatic, economic, military. What can India do right now? What are our external diplomatic options? Look at these days, External Affairs Minister Dr. S. Jaishankar is in London to attend G7 foreign ministers meeting. This is in a way to engage with important partners to impress upon the need for cooperation and the need for assistance for India. Hopefully that is personally the goal, right? Engaging others. Economically, what we can do? We have started accepting aid. We have started accepting gifts and we are actively seeking them. We are looking at any ways to augment our resources. But a few months back, we were also sending vaccines outside to help others, right? So economic ability is a part of what you can do, what you can't do. And at times, economy is also the hindrance in what you can do or can't do, right? Not every country can do the same thing. Militarily right now, what are the options? So first of all, securing the borders of India in a time when India is internally facing difficulties is important, but also diplomatically engaging with the neighbors in such a way that any tensions can be diffused. Certainly things do not escalate in a negative direction is also what we can think of militarily. All right. So in any given scenario, in any given situation, all these three tools would be available, but it is not necessary that all these three tools would be used. Right? It's a combination of these three or any two of the three or any single one. But these are the options that a country has. Let's move on. Let's talk about forms of behavior in international relations. And this is quickly telling you that we generally are looking at patterns. We cannot go too much into details in every case. Why? This is the subject. This is the difficulty of the subject. You have to go through the entirety of the globe. So we are only talking about the most important fact, the most important terms that you would come across. So if you see states interacting with each other, states like India, United States, India, Pakistan, India, China, generally what is it that you would see happening? You would either see cooperation. So right now, India and United States are cooperating. In the past also, previous year, we had provided medical supplies to US. Right now, the US is supplying medical tool to us. Cooperation in any given area. All countries would like to enhance cooperation as much as possible because this is least costly behavior. Or there would be competition. Now every country, just as we have national interest, other countries also have national interest. They would also like to do well for themselves. Now you could see that Mr. Biden or the American administration prioritized the vaccination of American people first and then had put on hold export of certain items, articles, which are important also for development of vaccines in India. So every country has national interests. So it is not out of friendship or out of philanthropy countries would be doing things. Countries would like to first safeguard their own interests, and when interests diverge, there would be competition for resources, competition for supplies. All right. It is important to manage competition. It is important to manage competition, and that's why we need rules. That's why we need organization. And it always remains, managing competition always remains a process in progress, right? And then the third kind of behavior that you will see in interaction between states is conflict. Now the aim of foreign policies is to resolve conflict, is to remove conflict, not allow conflicts to take place, but conflicts do happen, and that's why countries have fought wars, countries have militaries, right? So when you see these things, you must understand in any given relation, the cooperation is based on interests. When interests converge, right, there are similarities in interests, you will find cooperation. When interests diverge, many of you would not be able to see the red ink. So please also notice that I am also speaking, right? Because I can't change the pen of the color in this particular slide, right? So hopefully you will cooperate. When interests diverge, what would happen? Either competition would happen or conflict would happen. Right? We have seen the example of cooperation. Trade is another example of cooperation, engagement. Free trade agreements are another example of cooperation when countries think that both of them stand to benefit from cooperation. When interests diverge, competition. Different positions of India and United States on intellectual property rights at the WTO. Right now, India has been arguing that the TRIPS, intellectual property rights related rules of WTO, should be read in such a way that they promote access of vaccine for all. United States, European countries, Japan traditionally have had a different view. They would like to safeguard the interests of commercial entities who have invested billions of dollars in researching these medicines. Though the American president, rightly so, has announced a temporary waiver on intellectual property rights, which would enable access to vaccine theoretically at least. This has been an announcement that has been made only recently, so the impact of it would need to be understood better. But then understand, on IPR in India and United States have different approaches. Developing and developed countries have different approaches. This is competition. Developing countries would like the rules to be such which caters to their interest. Developed countries would like rules to be such that which caters their interest, all right? And their interests differ because they are at different stages of development. Their histories differ, right? There can be any number of reasons. So the management of competition, that's why requires rules. Because competition remains unmanaged, it would inevitably lead to conflict. Now conflict is something that can be either in the form of a physical war over territory, or confrontation on the borders, just as it happened on India-China border last year, continued for a long time, or conflict in the form of, as it happened between United States and China. Under President Donald Trump, United States escalated tariffs on imports from China, and President Donald Trump, China also responded in kind, and that became what was known as the tariff wars, trade wars, right? So again, conflict needs to be managed, put to an end, and again this would also require rules, right? Promoting cooperation also requires rules. Managing competition also requires rules so that it doesn't become conflict, and conflict also requires rules to be managed, to be handled, all right? Please understand this. So states either cooperate with each other, compete with each other, have conflicts with each other. In some cases, all these three would be present in one relationship, any one relationship. It is possible that all these three things may remain present in a relationship. Most important relationship in which the three elements have been visible, if we are not talking about right now, we are talking about a time frame, India-China relations. They have been able to cooperate. That's how they were able to maintain peace on the borders since the 1990s. They have competition in terms of trade. India's large trade deficit is an important issue, but it is only through cooperation that we see that India-China trade had expanded. And conflict, of course, there remains differences on the border on which there has been a war in 1960s, 1962, and then there is also the recent flare-up on the border, right? In one relation, you can see the existence of all these three simultaneously. So when you are studying international relations, one thing becomes important, and that is patience, all right? And please don't think that whatever I am writing, anything that I am writing is in a way gospel that you need to necessarily write, all right? It's not that. Follow me, things would become easier. In any case, no question is going to come from this. This is laying down the ground for you to understand what is going to come next, all right? Which is a lot of facts, but facts need some basis for you to deal with. Now, we talked about the practice of foreign policy. Let's also talk about the theory of foreign policy. So, idealism in foreign policy, principles of India's foreign policy. How does India, or in simple terms, what does India say it seeks from the world, and how would it like the world to be? So that's where you need to understand that over the years, we are talking about the last 70 years and more, all right? That's basically the span of India's foreign policy. Foreign policy is neither understood today at this instant, nor is understood through a few years. It has to be understood in the long term, right? To understand the commonalities that have persisted. So principles like Panchsheel. When India became independent as a poor country, but a large country which was also aware of its own place in the world, India advocated certain values, right? These values are articulated in agreements like the Panchsheel, right? Panchsheel comes from the 5 principles. It was the part of the treaty between India and China on trading relations in Tibet in the 1950s. And these are nothing but expectations that India had set in that relations with China. First is mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity and sovereignty, meaning India is saying to China and China is saying to India that we would respect each other's sovereignty, territorial integrity. Mutual non-aggression, that we will not attack each other. Mutual non-interference, alright, mutual non-interference. We will not interfere in each other's affairs. And equality and mutual benefit, and we will treat each other as equals and we will then cooperate for mutual benefit. It would not be one-sided but for mutual benefit, right? So that's basically, whether you call it Panchsheel, whether you call it by any other name, there are certain ideas in India's foreign policy that have remained important, alright? So you have to understand that Panchsheel as an agreement with China did not succeed because 1962 war meant that China violated all these principles. But did this mean that as ideas India let go of these principles? No. From Mr. Nehru to Mr. Modi, the theory of India's foreign policy, the idealism of India's foreign policy is based on these ideas. So we would still see India putting significant premium on sovereignty and territorial integrity, non-interference. To this day, in any relations, peaceful coexistence, peaceful resolution of disputes, anti-colonialism. Now there are certain things which India opposed. So India opposed any sort of discrimination in the international system. Domination of one group of country over another. These are certain things which India opposes. It can be seen in its anti-colonial stance. Colonialism is physical control, physical, political, economic control of one country over another, just as Britain dominated India. And India advocated end of colonialism. That remained a part of its foreign policy. Anti-imperialism, indirect control of one country over the other, right? By creating dependence. India has remained strongly anti-imperial also. Non-alignment. Non-alignment refers to the quest for maintaining independence of decision making. In one circumstance, which was 1940s, it meant India wanted to remain non-aligned in a world wherein increasingly the choices that were being forced were either to side with the United States or side with USSR, right? Non-alignment. Now today also we talk about multi-alignment, that today's India is willing to engage with as many actors as possible. Now why is that happening? Again, that is a way of ensuring independence of foreign policy. We don't say anybody is our best friend. We say everybody is our best friend. That's another way of maintaining the independence of our foreign policy. It is a difficult task, but that is what a country like India would always do. A country like India in the past or today does not view itself as a junior partner of any other country. Now, multilateralism. What does multilateralism mean? Multilateralism simply is a reference to engagement between more than two countries on the basis of commonly agreed upon rules, principles, institutions. Multilateralism. So generally multilateralism is used in the context of any area where cooperation between multiple countries is required to achieve a goal. So for example, United Nations. United Nations is a multilateral organization, meaning it has more than 193 countries These 193 countries, at least theoretically, have come together to deal with the common challenges to international peace and security, to promote the idea of cooperation to achieve sustainable development, or to promote the idea of human rights, all right, multilateralism. India has throughout its independent history believed in multilateralism, advocated multilateralism. India does not want the world to be dominated by one power or a combination of powers, but India wants a world wherein power, influence, capabilities are distributed evenly, wherein the stability of the world is ensured by cooperation among multiple countries. Multilateralism still remains an important part of India's foreign policy. All right. Multilateralism, as I told you, simply refers to engagement between more than two countries on mutually agreed upon rules of engagement, principles or institutions. Gujarat Doctrine. Now, Gujarat Doctrine is a reference to the position taken by India's foreign minister and prime minister formerly, Mr. I.K. Gujral, Inder Kumar Gujral, in 1996. Again, the elements of Gujarat Doctrine were that India would treat its smaller neighbors magnanimously, would do whatever it can for them in goodwill rather than seeking in return from them. India also assured that the relations would be based on non-interference, respect for sovereignty. Now, repetition of the terms, respect for sovereignty. India also expected that the differences between disputes between countries of South Asia would be resolved peacefully. All right. So again, you would see that some ideas have a life of their own in foreign policy. It is never the choice between option A and option B, that either India would be this or India would be that. At any given point in time, India's foreign policy is both a reflection of who is in power, but also what has been India's experience, self-definition of it in the world. All right. Now, neighborhood first. So from Gujarat Doctrine to neighborhood first. Neighborhood first is a term which is used in the context of neighborhood of India since 2014. Again, what does it say? It says, identifies India's neighborhood and Indian Ocean region as the most important areas for India for political and diplomatic priority. It suggests a model of cooperation which fulfills the needs of the neighbors, promotes regional integration, coming together, promotes connectivity. But this policy also is based on the assurance of mutual equality, respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity. Right? Now let's move forward and let's look at some of the policies. Act East. And please understand that we are not going to read them and dictate them in today's class. Please understand that this is about 70 years of what India's foreign policy is. So if you have a broad idea now about, not that I am saying that you didn't have any knowledge about India's foreign policy. By all means, many of you may be very, very knowledgeable. All of you may be very knowledgeable. But when I am repeating some of the things, it means drawing your attention to the most important things rather than those special facts that you may be searching for, right? Act East is a policy that India has adopted towards Southeast Asia primarily, and now towards the countries of the East, Japan, South Korea, etc. Now again, policies like these also in a way reflect India's location, India's engagement with actors who are close to its geography, right? Connect Central Asia. Again, this is a region with which India does not have direct connectivity. but India views this region with interest, Central Asia. So we have policies like Connect Central Asia. Through the course of the lectures and while preparing for the examination, you should be aware of what India stands for. In one line, if I have to tell you what I am trying to teach you, is this, is the expectation and the requirement that you should be, if you are aware of any number of things and you are not aware of what is India's position on any particular issue, well then your priorities need to be changed. So you should be aware of what India stands for, right? The recent times have seen a 5S approach, that India would adopt a 5S approach in foreign policy. India's foreign policy stands for these 5S. What are these 5S? Samman, respect. Can you see? Mutual respect for each other's territorial integrity. So now from Panchsheel of 1950s, 1954 to 5S approach of 2014 till date. Different governments in power, different ideological spectrums, but change in language. We as India have certain primary ideas that we keep on repeating. Samvad, dialogue, alright, dialogue. So that is what we are saying. Equality, mutual benefit, peaceful coexistence, dialogue. And then sahyog, cooperation, alright. Equality and mutual benefit, idea of cooperation. Shanti, peace, peaceful coexistence. Samriddhi, prosperity. Alright. So again, these are some of the important ideas, rhetorically speaking, theoretically speaking, about India's foreign policy. From the independence to till date. That is what India's foreign policy is. And now coming to the subject matter, right? We will take a break. Here is a break of 5 minutes. Just think of your questions now. And I can see some of the students also summarizing it, right? So Bhuwana has written domestic factors, how cohesive we are, monsoonal effect, societal upheavals, communal harmony, etc. Thank you, Bhuwana, for doing this. That is what I was trying to explain, but this is something that should remain at the back of your mind. Here is a break of 5 minutes. In these 5 minutes, do me a favor. Think of the doubts that may have come to your mind. Right? Doubts. Are there any doubts? Of course, some of you may still have the best doubt that I am not able to write. Beyond that, try and go beyond that, right? Because there was nothing to be written so far. Secondly, are there any questions that you would like to raise? Thinking about your doubts and then questions. So when we come back from the break, we will be taking up those questions. But we will also be looking at some of the key terms, jargon kind of terms that are used. And we'll try to understand them as simply as possible. Alright. And then we will go to that part wherein some students have shown interest, how many lectures, sources, etc. etc. I'll be talking about how to place yourself for preparing international relations in this examination. Alright. And how would we go about? So hopefully by now you have understood foreign policy generally and India's approach to foreign policy, right? Here is a break of 5 minutes. So we are back from the break. And I can see a question on the screen. The question is from Rishabh, and Rishabh says, our foreign policy is static in nature or it is fluctuating from country to country? And Rishabh has then also sought to explain the question. He says that what he means is sometimes India remains quiet where it can lead from the front, like Myanmar issue. Being a democratic country, we should have at least condemned the coup, but we remained quiet. That is what Rishabh is saying. That's his query. So Rishabh, first of all, let me try and make sense of your question for me and for others. So you have made it amply clear. Well, remember at the beginning I had said that there is a theory of foreign policy and there is a practice. So theoretically, yes, you may say that as an ideally, rather than theory, there is idealism of foreign policy, and then there is the real world wherein at times it seems that idealism is compromised for some practical reasons. So I told you that countries may have different modes of behavior. I've told you that. There are principles, but then there are also what can be called realpolitik. So it is true that India is expected to take a more stringent position when it comes to any erosion of democratic rights or institutions in neighboring countries. But you must also remember that India's foreign policy has stood consistently for non-interference. Alright? So, whether we criticize Myanmar or not becomes important when we are criticized by international organizations, by international figures for not taking a strong stand vis-a-vis military rule in Myanmar. But that is not the primary reason why we do things. The fact is that Myanmar is a neighbor of India. Geographically speaking, India shares a land boundary and a maritime boundary with Myanmar. In recent times, in terms of counterinsurgency on the border, in terms of connectivity projects like the Kaladan multimodal project, in terms of engagement with the East Asian countries as part of Look East, for multiple reasons, not a single reason, but for multiple reasons, it is important for India to engage with Myanmar constantly. Now, who do we engage with in Myanmar is a question on which there has been some difficulty given the history of Myanmar. Military rule has been a long-term reality of Myanmar, so has been pro-democracy struggles. But since 2009-10, this was not a difficulty because constitutional change election took place and we were able to make rapid strides. So even now, our stand is tempered by our sensitivity towards who is in power in Myanmar and the impact of our relations on our long-term interest. Military rule may be a short-term reality, but right now the reality is that military is in power. Secondly, our experience also has told us that, as in case of Maldives, it is entirely the people of a particular country who have to decide who should rule, who should govern. So the last decade, the government in Maldives was more and more tilted towards China, or at least so was it argued. And also, certain steps of the Maldivian government were antithetical to India's interests. And then there were calls for strong action, interference. India had criticized the actions of Maldivian president. But ultimately, to what extent should it intervene? To what extent should it take a position? is always tempered by the urgency of the situation, the dynamics of the situation. So there would be a consistent expectation from India because India is a democracy, because India is the largest regional power. But India's response, A, would depend on the situation. So the answer to your question is that on a particular issue, India's stand, response would depend on the particulars of that case. In the longer historical perspective, India would try to be consistent with what it has argued to be its principles in foreign policy. And this tension would always continue for any country. So countries are not individuals, or let's say they are like individuals. And individuals are not perfect. Human beings are not perfect. Countries are not perfect. Situations are not perfect. So in particular cases, you would have to look at the cases. Why the national interest is often considered as a vague and ambiguous term, Sumit? Because I can say national interest and I can say anything. If I have power, I can say national interest means, I'm only giving you an example, worshipping so and so God. I'm only giving you an example, right? If I have the power, then I can thrust upon national interest and the idea of my idea of national interest on others. It's a vague concept because time is not static, because world is changing, because a country is changing. So we can't say that the elements of national interest in particulars remain the same from decade 1 to decade 2. So that's why when I tried to explain to you, I said broadly just understand national interests would be the goals of a country, important areas for a country, and there should be a broad political consensus on it. Alright? So broadly, that's why we advise in the examination also, always take a constitutional line, always take an institutional line, and you are safe. You can't write this examination and also be a revolutionary. You can't write this examination and you also be a conservative. Alright? People have different ideological predilections. You are writing this examination to become a bureaucrat. And ideally a bureaucrat should be as neutral as possible, right? So you are striving for that office. So why the national interest is often considered as vague and ambiguous term? Because there is no single definition of national interest. Because the term national interest may mean different things to different people. Because the elements of national interest in their specificity may differ from time to time. Alright? From ideological groups to other ideological groups. Alright? So that's why it is an ambiguous term. It cannot be scientifically defined. It cannot be measured. So it is always in debate. Just as most of the concepts that you will find in humanities or social sciences. Alright, so that's the answer to your question. Okay, so let's look at some of the key terms. Strategic is a term that is often used in international relations. Strategic this, strategic that. First of all, get its dictionary meaning. Alright. Second of all, how should we understand this term when we look at it followed by or before any particular term, right? Strategic interests. Strategic has two kind of usage in international relations. Traditionally, it is used to denote any development things which are important from the perspective of military and security. Alright, strategic. Strategic also, if you look at its simple meaning, has a time element to it. Anything that is important from a long-term perspective, long-term interest of a country, right? So strategic interest, long-term interests of a country. Strategic relations, significant relations of a country, all right? which also means a long-term time horizon, strategic interests, strategic relations. That's something that you should always keep in mind, right? There is no fixed definition of it, but often when it is used, most of the time when it is used, these are the meanings that is being attached to it. Geostrategy. What is geostrategy? Again, long-term plans, long-term interests of a country, of multiple countries being linked with a geography, playing out in a geography, geostrategy. So in a sense, what you should, in a very simple terms, strategic long-term interests. Geostrategy, in simple terms, just understand it as direction of foreign policy. Direction of foreign policy. Alright, direction of foreign policy. I'll give you an example. When we say that the Malacca Strait is geostrategically important, what does it mean? It means, or strategically important, it means that any navies operating from Indian Ocean to Pacific Ocean would pass through the Malacca Strait. So it is militarily important. It's a narrow passage of water and trillions of dollars of trade passes through it each year, and that trade is not of one country, so multiple countries are interested in that geography. And from the security perspective, this region is going to be important long term. From the economic perspective, this region is going to remain important long term, right? So geostrategically important. Or Afghanistan is geostrategically important country, because Afghanistan then is located such that developments in Afghanistan may have an impact on the interest of other countries, or other countries, multiple countries are interested in Afghanistan. It shares border with China, India, Pakistan, alright. So that's why it is geostrategically important. Direction, geography of foreign policy, geography of interests, right? Geopolitics, politics of location, politics in location, alright. So let's say Nepal is geopolitically important, or let's say the location of Nepal is geopolitically important for India. Again, not much difference from geostrategy. But geopolitically, when we are saying geopolitically, we are also saying that geopolitics of a region, we are saying what is happening in this region. What are the most important geographical attributes of this region? How do these geographical attributes then impact the politics of this region? And the politics in this region, when it impacts the interests of others, then we can say that this country is geostrategically important for us. Alright, so geopolitics of Nepal is important because Nepal is a geostrategically important country. That would be the ideal way of saying it, right? But then please understand that all of these terms, geostrategy, geopolitics, have a reference to geography, location, which is important in international relations, and politics, policies, what is happening, strategy, long-term planning, right? So if you don't remember anything, long-term military security significance, strategic partnerships, India has a lot of strategic partnerships. Don't worry, India does not define its strategic partnership. The ministries don't define strategic partnerships, but you will come across the term many a times. So have a general sense. If you have a general sense, move on, just read. Alright? Okay. Power, hard, soft, smart. Power is a term which is used a lot by different people. I think there is only one definition of power. If you look at the power of nature, right? The wind velocity, or the way coronavirus has been able to subdue us because of the influence that it has on us, right? Would you say coronavirus is powerful or not? It is powerful. It may be small, it doesn't have to do with the size. So similarly, power, if you look at it, we are afraid of cyclones, we are afraid of lightning because of the energy contained in them, and that energy, the impact that it would have on us. So the fear of lightning would in a way make us live at home. So that is the power of lightning over us, the influence that lightning has over us. Fear of cyclone would force us to prepare or to face the consequences. That's the power of cyclone over us. All right. So power in simple terms is the ability to influence intended outcomes. In international relations, intended outcomes, right? What does it mean? Power in simple terms is the ability of a state to ensure its intended results, what it wants. All right. So power is the ability to influence intended outcomes or to achieve goals. Right? You can have goals, you can have national interests, you can declare them, but it would only be said powerful to the extent that you are able to achieve them even in the face of opposition. So on this particular slide, I can't change the color to anything other than red, but don't worry. Please follow me also. Power. We said it is the ability to achieve intended outcomes. Now, that is one way of looking at it, ability of a country. And then depending on the way it is used, depending on its attributes, it has been termed as hard, soft or smart power, right? So hard power is the coercive ability to achieve intended outcomes, or hard power is the ability to achieve intended outcomes through coercion, right? Use of force, fear. So hard power, what kind of examples do we talk about when we talk about hard power? We talk about military, we talk about the size of the military, but also the scope of activities of the military, the technology that it uses, the armament that it has. So it's easier to calculate. We also talk about hard power when we see military threats or military actions in pursuing one's interests. We also talk of hard power when we see the use of economy, sanctions, bans, trade bans on other countries to impact the outcomes. We also see the use of hard power in wars, right? It is the way power is used, it is the attribute of power. But to define it, these are all coercive means. How are you achieving intended outcomes? By coercing, by forcing, by the example of force or by the use of force, hard power. Soft power. Now soft power is the ability to achieve intended outcomes through persuasion or attraction. That we were able to achieve or change the behavior of another country, but by not forcing it, but by persuading it, by attracting it, right? So it is the use of elements of attraction, culture, diplomacy, all right? Use of commonality through elements like cinema, music, civilization, values like democracy, right? We keep on saying that India is world's largest democracy. United States is world's oldest democracy. So what is the value of these terms? What we are trying to do is we are trying to portray a positive image. By doing so, what we are aiming to do is we are aiming to influence the behavior of other country. All right. Soft power would also be when we provide developmental aid, technology to other countries who may need it. Soft power, the way power is used or elements of power are used to achieve outcomes. Smart power. Smart power is now a term which is used by some to say that the optimal combination of hard power and soft power in a context specific manner, right? Optimal combination of hard power, soft power in a context specific manner. That's the most successful way of using power. Please understand, none of these are scientific categories. Hard power is still easy to measure because it is seen in those concrete forms. Soft power is difficult to define, difficult to measure, and certainly the results that soft power achieves is difficult to measure. All right. These are in a way jargons of the discipline, which are justified or proven by respective experts who are talking about this subject, right? Joseph Nye, an American expert, talked about soft power, hard power, right, and smart power. So beyond a point, don't get too much enamored by these terms. Don't get enamored by these terms, all right? But simply for a working understanding, keep in mind hard power is the coercive ability to achieve intended outcomes. Soft power is persuasive ability to achieve intended outcomes, and smart power is the optimal combination of hard and soft power attributes in a context specific manner. All right. Avinash, I will repeat geopolitics. You have said please anybody repeat what is geopolitics. Geopolitics is politics of location. What is happening in a particular geography? How geography affects the politics of a location. Hill tribes, plain tribes. People living on the coast, people living in the plains. That may impact the politics of that location. Geopolitics. Looking at it from outside, when an outsider is trying to understand that country, he would try and understand what is the geopolitics of that country. Right? Geopolitics, politics of location. Right? Okay. Let's move forward. These are the key terms that we have seen. Now these are the things that you need to forget. Whatever we have talked about so far, forget. Just understand them as conversation. All right? Because none of this would be actually practically very useful in the real world. But these are certain ways of looking at international relations that you should keep in mind. Right? About international relations, my understanding is this, that this is one subject about which everybody knows everything. Why? Because every home has an opinion on India-Pakistan relations, or India-China relations, or India-United States relations. Everyone knows what should India do, what should India be doing, or the government of India going to do, or their favorite leader going to do. So that's the difficulty of teaching such a discipline. Right? Everybody is an expert. But the good thing is that our ambition is very small. Our ambition is not to predict the strategic behavior of India. Our ambition is not to make the foreign policy of India or United States. Our ambition is very simply to look at the subject and realize, A, in what forms would I find it in the examination? And B, how can I, to the best of my ability, look at the subject from the perspective of the examination. All right? Okay, let's move forward. So what are the things that you will keep in mind? There are few things that you will keep in mind, and these are now the important things. If you like to make notes, please make notes. First thing in any examination that you should do is this. Always look at the syllabus, and the syllabus will tell you that international relations appears in the preliminary test round under the topic current events of significance, national and international. All right, current developments of significance, national and international. In the mains examination, it is the ambit of GS paper 2, and then in the personality test round. So looking at the syllabus gives you the direction. What is to be studied from what perspective? Why I should not have hypothetical questions always, because that is a waste of time. I have limited time for the examination. Hypothetical question, I cannot treat myself as a school kid whose creativity should have been encouraged by the teacher, but my school teacher did not do so, my college teachers did not do so. So now I will come and sit preparing for this examination. I like my creativity to be encouraged. Please, let's understand different platforms are for different things. So looking at the syllabus always gives you an idea. Question paper, syllabus does not tell you much. Does not tell you much. So then the second basis of looking at any subject matter and looking at it from the perspective of the examination is looking at it in the form of a question, right? So look at the question papers. That's the second set of lens that you always have. Syllabus, question paper. Why? To narrow your effort down, to bring in focus. What are the sources? Some people asked. For the whole examination or being better informed, reading newspaper is important. Reading newspaper is important. All right. So my suggestion for you would be, you can make it a lifelong habit of reading newspapers or reading. But after a while you would realize that if only you had read NCERTs and newspapers, maybe it would have saved you a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of money maybe, right? For IR, newspaper is a must. International relations, newspaper is a must. Class notes and material, right? Material would be uploaded to your platform, and if I am noting something down, making a framework, please note it down. So that is something that would help you. NCERT, every subject has a starting point as NCERT. International relations is generally not taught in schools. Even in colleges, as part of the political science courses, there is one paper, right? So this is a subject that is taught after school in colleges. So then one NCERT that you can read is class 12th, contemporary world politics, right? Someone had asked this question. Contemporary world politics. Now contemporary world politics would not give you everything. It would give you a sense of direction, a sense of language. That is something that this book would give you. The favorite question that everybody has, which is it enough? Well, that is for you to answer. All right. What is enough? What is not enough? These are not the questions that you should be asking when starting, right? But what is it that a material is doing for you is something that you should have in mind. So NCERT class 12 contemporary world politics gives you an idea of India, gives you an idea of the world of 1940s, 50s, 1960s, in which India's foreign policy was shaped. It gives you an idea about our neighborhood. It gives you an idea about organizations like the United Nations. All right. So it gives you a footing, a starting point in the examination. NCERT class 12 contemporary world politics. Current affairs coverage by Vision IAS, right? As Vision IAS current affairs bulletins are available, or you can follow any other source that you have in mind. But regularity is what is important. So now what happens is, when you have attended the classes, you have the basics. Basics not only means information on the content, but also information on the fact that beyond a point, you should not be worried too much. Information on the extent to which one should be thinking. Now, not every solution is a perfect solution in a given situation, right? Class gives you basics. Newspaper is for repetition. As you study something, you start repeating it. Newspaper helps you consolidate. What is newspaper reading? You would be reading news articles plus opinions of people, editorials, opinions, and news developments which are relevant. So what is happening? Some information is being repeated. Some context is being repeated. That is reinforcement in your mind. Certain things are being consolidated. Some articles are like gist of a particular area, gist of a particular relation. If you have studied it in the class and then you also read it in the newspaper, what is happening? Consolidation, right? Repetition and consolidation. Plus, it is also making additions to your knowledge. Now, this addition is important for questions in the examination, because historic questions are not asked from IR. IR is not history. History is only a part of IR. All right. And this addition is also increasing your information or making you better educated. Whether you would like to do that or not is a different matter, right? But that is what is happening. So in the class, what you are doing is learning how to read newspaper. Why? Why? Some people are quite anxious if it is not getting completed, etc., whether I get this or not, get that or not. There are no guarantees in life. There are no guarantees in the examination. In case you are looking for one, please start respecting yourself better than that. So what is happening is this: from now till mains, right? And generally from the classes, from the time that you study international relations in classes till mains, the examination period is long. So then what was taught in the class may have seen further developments through the course of the time, because international relations in that sense is also dynamic. Things may change from now into 6 months. All right. So that's why there is no shortcut to looking at newspapers regularly, reading newspapers regularly. All right. I can't claim to teach you something that would be helpful for you for whole your life. I don't have any such information, right? Okay, let's move on. Let's look at some other rules, right? Please avoid what ifs. What if this happens? What if that happens? What if this had happened in the past? Counterfactual, counter-historicals has no value in the examination. Counterfactuals, counter-historicals. What if? Lekin, magar, parantu. What if? There is no role of this factor in the examination. What if? This is not a good way of preparing. This is not a good way of looking at it. Taruna, try using white color pen at least thrice in the class. I have repeated this. On this slide, I can't use white, any other pen apart from red. This is something technical, which we will try and fix, right? But I have repeated this information thrice. Again, you are coming up with that. Please understand. Avoid what ifs. What if? What if this happens? What if that happens? That has no value in the examination. That wastes your time, and that is a wild goose chase in most scenarios, right? Avoid what ifs. Avoid fear of missing out. The subject matter is so vast in the examination in general and IR in particular also, that you are going to miss out on things. Be comfortable with that. You are not going to learn everything. Be comfortable with that. You have to do just enough. Right? If you are giving your 6 to 8 hours regularly for a long period of time, you are actually doing what is required to be done. Please remember, you are not making foreign policy. Again, while studying IR, do not think that you are making foreign policy. Do not take that burden on yourself. Do not take the burden of being the most intelligent person in the room. Have a perspective. Just relax. Who are you? You are a student. Well, people have told you that the future of this country rests on your shoulder. I also believe that. You should also believe that. But that's a lifelong pursuit, right? Right now, your pursuit is clearing an examination, learning for that. So your pursuit is not to make foreign policy. Making foreign policy, if you are interested in foreign service, you will learn in foreign service. Right now, your job is to read newspaper regularly, so that if there is a bill in the parliament, if it addresses a particular political or social issue, you are aware of those political and social issues. If there is a debate on any dispute, you are aware what intelligent and knowledgeable people are saying about it. And then the ability to reproduce, summarize that in the examination. That is what is being expected out of you. Please be exam centric always. You can complain about factor A, factor B, things being difficult, things being out of syllabus. That again is just a waste of time. Always be exam centric when looking at an information, when looking at a subject, right? And patience and listening are important skills. This is something that I believe. Patience, meaning not jumping the gun, not thinking that all your needs should be fulfilled right now, right here, is very important in this examination because it's a long-term process. Studying with me also would require patience, right? So I request your patience. Listening is an important skill. Well, you would be writing a lot in this examination. That is what it should be done for clearing this examination. But there is a stage of this examination in which you would practically understand the importance of listening. Sitting in many mock interviews, one realizes that many a times most of the young individuals lack the ability to concentrate on the sentence being spoken. Why? Because these days everything is about saving time, right? We can run a thing at 1.5x or 2.5x. Why? Because we will save time. But nobody has answered to this question. What would you do by saving time? You save time on everything, but what would you do by saving time? So then when somebody is asking you a question in the personality test, many times you are responding to the position in your mind rather than responding to what the gentleman or lady has said, asked you. Why? Because you were not there. You lost them in the middle of the sentence. Why? Because you did not practice listening. All right. So that's something that is also important. That is what I believe. Any of these advices are not compulsory. You can take them, you can leave them. Understand the pattern and process. Facts would be easier to recall. Repeat the line. Understand the process and the pattern. This examination is about the process and the pattern, not individual facts. But during the course of the examination, you will go through a lot of facts. The simple doubt that in your mind that would always be with you, how do I remember these things? And that's the trick. The examination is not about remembering. The brain is not made to remember significant amounts of information. Information is readily available wherever it is needed. The important thing is how to develop recognition patterns wherein you are able to recall better, wherein you are able to associate better, right? Because you cannot just remember everything, right? So understand the pattern and the process. If you understand the pattern and the process, relating with facts becomes important, becomes easier, right? Facts would be easier to recall. Every fact need not be remembered. It is not a competition for rote learning. Please understand, right? Now I can see another question. Any website? I'll come to that also. Second thing, as a general note of cautions: patience, understanding pattern and the process, not worrying about facts much. Try to be solution oriented rather than problem oriented. While writing answers, you need to be solution oriented. While preparing in the examination, you need to be constantly solution oriented. All right. So that's something that should be your approach. That should be your approach. When you are looking at something, anything, when you are looking at the management or mismanagement or any other word that you would like to use of the COVID-19 situation, what can you learn from it? From this situation? Can you draw a simple architecture of India's response to COVID-19? What do I mean by architecture? Start with any responsible authority, start with the government of India, union, states. Who is responsible at the union? What legal provisions are there? What agencies are there? Right? Similarly at the state. So this is what is called pattern. All right. When you have the use of something in mind, you will recall that particular fact also. That's what I am calling by patterns. Right? Try to be solution oriented. Syllabus. Let's look at the syllabus. Preliminary examination. Current events of national and international importance. All right. That's the syllabus. Mains examination. India and its neighborhood relations. Paper 2. GS paper 2. India and its neighborhood relations. Bilateral, regional and global groupings, organizations, groups, right? And agreements involving India and or affecting India's interests. Agreements, groups, organizations of which India is a member. Important relations of India. That's the meaning of this particular part. The next one is politics and policies of developed and developing countries, right? Effects of policies and politics of developed and developing countries on India's interests, right? How does, if United States changes its immigration policy or its IPR policy, does it have an impact on India? All right. Moving on. Indian diaspora, people of Indian origin living abroad. Where are they located? What do they do? What are their attributes? What are their challenges? That's something that is expected of you to understand. Important international institutions, agencies, fora, their structure and mandate. Organizations like UN, WHO, what do they do? How do they take decisions? Are there any specific areas of debates in recent times? Right? So that's basically generally what you have in mind. And personality test. What happens in personality test? IR is an important area to be covered as a point of conversation. So we have this information. All right. We have this knowledge. Now we will derive from this knowledge, from syllabus, we will derive the knowledge. All right. That in the preliminary examination, we need to also look at questions. In the mains examination, we also need to look at questions. And when we have done these two, we are well placed for dealing with such topics in the personality test round also. Right? So that's something that you should try and remember. Now, the subject matter is going to be India specific, India's relations. And this is how we are going to study it. All right. We start with India. We go to India's neighborhood, the first topic. We go to India's extended neighborhood. All right. Extended neighborhood. What does extended neighborhood mean? Region beyond our immediate neighbors. We go to important regions, Africa, Central Asia, West Asia. We look at important countries, US, Russia, China, Japan. We look at diaspora, and at the end we look at international organizations, forums, groupings, agreement. That is how we will be progressing, right? So each of these areas would be a module, right? Would be a module. Neighborhood, extended neighborhood regions, important countries, diaspora, international organizations. Meaning, look at them as groups. The content related with them, if I am using any, would be uploaded once the module is complete, right? Why is that done? Because if there has to be any addition, that should be done. Okay, you are having your own conversation, right? So that is something that happens. International organizations, fora, grouping, this is how we are going to do it. Hopefully you understood it. And now let's for those who would like to write something, let's write a few things. Hopefully many of you understood what we were trying to do, right? So we are going to study international relations. We will take it as India's relations. You would look at the syllabus and the question paper to start with. You have a general idea of India's foreign policy, a general idea. That was the goal today, right? You at least have a general idea. Key terms, tools, right? When we go to any country or state or region, what is it that you would be focusing on in that particular region? To the extent possible, all right, we would be looking at location, map. Very simple questions on location are asked. So this is done for creating awareness, all right. We will be looking at a framework of that relation. Largely a broad view of that relation, which can encompass historical pattern and also inform us about the current status of their relationship. And then this opens up into different aspects of that relation, all right, aspects. It generally means that we look at political ties, we look at economic engagement between countries, economic engagement between countries, all right. Economic engagement would mean areas like trade or investments or development partnership, all right. We also look at security, defense related elements of that relation if it is applicable in that case, all right. We look at strategic elements of that relationship. That is what means by different aspects. Now, when it comes to the preliminary examination, we can visualize by looking at the question paper and looking at the syllabus, questions related with location, relations, and organizations is asked. Generally simple question. Location, where is a particular region located, all right, where is a particular place located. Relation, agreements between countries, developments that have taken place so far or recently. Organization, publications of an organization, where is the organization located, any conferences, etc. These are the prominent kind of questions that you will find in the examination. So when we are doing a map based exercise, it's a preparation of readiness for location. When we are looking at a framework of the relationship, it is a preparation for the relations, agreements related aspect of any relation. All right. And then we also talk about organization separately wherever it is relevant. So that's basically the focus in the preliminary examination. When it comes to the mains examination, we need to have a basic understanding of a relation, and basic understanding is added with applied or current part, leading to a mains question. All right. So unless you have a basic understanding, in simple terms, what is the nature of that particular relation, you would have difficulty in answering the applied and current aspect of that question easily. All right. So that's basically what happens, but focus of the question mostly is on applied current developments, right? So basically, either a development inspires a question, right? An important agreement was signed between India and United States, for example. So the question would be on India and United States, or a development in itself becomes a question. Suppose an agreement was signed between India and United States, let's say LEMOA, Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Agreement, and the question became, discuss the significance of the recently signed Logistics Exchange Memorandum of Agreement between India and United States. All right. So that's basically what happens. It's not like a class 10th examination or the IIT JEE or the NEET examination, wherein largely certain degree of prediction and correlation between what was taught in class and what came in the examination directly be drawn. Here, class is for you to understand the boundaries and not worry, and to gather the tool on the basis of which you have to construct an answer in the mains examination, because nobody can predict questions. All right. So that's basically what you should keep in mind. There are few other things that you should keep in mind. For the preliminary examination, it is practice of MCQs that is important, and for the mains examination, the practice of answer writing. In what scenario are you doing it? Are you doing it in a test series? Are you doing it on your own in a time bound manner with friends? Is your choice. All right. So that's basically the only difference of orientation between the preliminary test and the mains examination. Otherwise, you are reading the same subject, the same information can be used for preliminary examination question or can be used as a point in an answer writing. All right. So the reading is not separate. The preparation is not separate. The orientation for both these stages of the examination is separate. So hopefully you understood this. What we are going to do is, we are going to look at some maps to start with. All right. We are going to look at some maps to start with. Now what you are going to see is the official map of India. The official map of India issued by the Survey of India. All right. The Survey of India. So this is the official map of India. Now, if you see, you can clearly identify that some countries share borders with India. So largely, generally, you should at least be aware of these countries, right? China, Pakistan, Afghanistan. If you go south, you will find south of Lakshadweep, Maldives, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, right? So these are the countries that share borders with India, and of course Myanmar. So a general location of India should be very clear in your mind. Should be very clear in your mind, right? The map of India, official map of India, is the official position of India. It may not reflect the factual control at any given point in time. So the maps that we would be using, or newspapers use, or different sources use, may come from different places. They do not represent the official position of the government of India, right? So that's something that you should keep in mind. Now, if you have to look at another map, we have this large map of India to again give us an idea that apart from these immediate countries, to the far east of India, to the eastern part of India, there is a large region on which, if you see, on land there is a contiguity. All right, on land there is a contiguity. You can move from India to Southeast Asia via Myanmar, via Thailand, right? And you can move till the Pacific. So geography is not decided by boundaries. All right, it is, the boundaries are political decisions of countries that they delimit themselves. And in any case, if anyone is again getting anxious as to I should change the color, don't worry. I am only using the map to give you an orientation. You don't have to become a cartographer or an expert of a map. Some maps do take more time to load. So that also happens. This is happening. This is simply because I'm trying to use the Survey of India map, right? That is the official map of India. Now, this is the world as you see. So, locational awareness is about your particular location. So, we are located in India. And then as you move on, extend. So, we would first be looking at India's neighborhood. So, we will be talking about this region, South Asia. But if you see, through the land, we can cross into Southeast Asia, South China Sea, Japan. This is Russia. Russia is a direct neighbor of United States. This is Alaska. And then if we are moving in United States, we can come to South America. All right. And then this is the Antarctic. Similarly, west of India, you can start with India, you can go travel to whole of West Asia, you can cross into Africa, right? I'm saying on the basis of land, it is quite possible. It is quite possible. But politically, it may not be possible because travel requires significant documentation, right? So basically, we are talking about a world which is divided in political borders, where states are important, states are sovereign. What does sovereignty mean? Sovereignty can mean a lot of things, but here it means that a sovereign is recognized to be the supreme decision making authority, right? So externally speaking, state is the unit that is mostly talked about. Now, let's start talking about India's neighborhood. That's the first module that we said we will be talking about. Let's start talking about India's neighborhood. Generally, if you are in the class, I would like to ask, what do you mean by neighborhood? What do you understand by neighborhood? So here, let's start with some degree of geography. All right, some element of geography. India's neighborhood is comprised of the countries with which it shares a land or maritime boundary. All right, land or maritime boundary shared by these countries with India, India with these countries. So these are our neighbors. Now our starting point is always going to be our neighborhood in international relations, because that's the first circle among the different circles that India straddles, right? Now, if you look at it politically, if you want to define it in a much more refined way, the immediate focus of India in its neighborhood is in South Asia, all right? So countries of our immediate neighborhood collectively constitute the region called South Asia. So South Asia is something that we will be dealing with first, all right? South Asia. When we say neighborhood, we generally mean South Asia. We generally mean South Asia. The countries of South Asia commonly are a member of one organization which throughout the years has attempted in a way integration of South Asia. That is called SAARC, all right, SAARC. So now you can start with a simple exercise of imagining which are these countries which share borders and land or maritime with India, right? Which are the countries which are members of SAARC? So when you start imagining this, well, it seems to be very simple, but this is basically the starting point, right? To remove the confusion. Countries sharing a land border with India start with the northwest, Afghanistan, Pakistan, and then as you move towards land, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, and then in the ocean you have Maldives and Sri Lanka. These are the countries of South Asia. But then there are other countries also, China, but China is not part of South Asia. Myanmar primarily identifies itself to be a Southeast Asian country, all right? So there can be various ways of looking at neighborhood. Geographically, neighborhood is defined by countries with whom India shares its borders. Politically, it is defined through regions like South Asia or countries of South Asia or members of the SAARC. Now, if we move forward, we need to understand one basic thing, that no matter which country becomes how important, India's neighborhood would always rank as a top priority for India. All right, so India's neighborhood ranks high in India's foreign policy priority. Why? Because as one of our former Prime Minister had said, and this line has been repeated a lot, one can change one's friend, choose one's friend, but one cannot choose one's geography or one's neighborhood, right? So this is the reality that we have to deal with. Now, if we are neighbors, that means we have a certain degree of sharedness. We share certain things. We are connected. All right. For a moment, if we stop thinking about religion, identities in antagonistic terms, or political personalities, political leaders, we would realize that we can see geography as a commonality between people of South Asia. We share a similar geographical region, the same geographical space. Economic opportunities for us are also similar. We are developing nations or least developed nations who by and large are endowed with certain important natural resources and remain in process of harnessing these natural resources or natural surroundings to obtain optimum economic outcomes. Our challenges are also similar. India has a large number of poor. So has Pakistan. So has Bangladesh. Large number of poor. We by any means are not rich countries. Shared past, and what is shared past? So if you imagine this landmass from the time of Ashoka, you will find that Ashokan inscriptions or pillars are found in modern day, what falls in modern day Afghanistan, Pakistan, India, Bangladesh. The imprints of this is also in Sri Lanka, Myanmar. Come back to the medieval periods from the ancient period. The Mughal Empire incorporated areas which may today fall in different countries of Pakistan or Bangladesh or India. Come a bit further into modern times. The British Empire had under its ambit those regions which today comprise countries of India, Pakistan and Bangladesh. So we have a common past. The history of separation is relatively new, right? And then we share an ecological space. What does it mean? It means from the Indo-Burma biogeographical region to the islands in the Indian Ocean. We have Lakshadweep, Andaman, Nicobar, and we have neighbors like Maldives, neighbors like Sri Lanka, which are island countries in themselves. We have coastal areas. So we understand cyclones or tsunamis as a threat to coastal communities. We have Himalayan states like Himachal Pradesh or Uttaranchal. So we understand that a Himalayan country like Bhutan faces threats in the future from glacial lake outbursts. We are a rain-fed agrarian economy. So we understand that Bangladesh, which is dependent on monsoon, is also ravaged by monsoon, floods or cyclones. We also understand that Pakistan by and large is an arid and rapidly desertifying landscape. We also understand that large parts of India remain rain-fed and arid. Now this shared ecological space means this shared history, means the shared past or culture, means that we can find enough to be common among ourselves to put aside our differences and pave a path which is advantageous for everyone. Now this is not an easy task. This requires constant engagement, right? Easier said than done. But if the destinies of these countries are linked, it means, looking from India's perspective, India's foreign policy success has to start with the neighborhood. India's interests are tied with what happens in South Asia. So if India wants to safeguard its national interests, that is economic growth, security and global status, it needs a stable, secure and prosperous South Asia, right? This is something that is commonly understood, that if we want to achieve our economic goals, or if we want to achieve our security related goals, if we want to achieve our status related goals, our neighborhood is the critical geography where it starts. It is a priority. We need a stable, secure, prosperous South Asia, right? I hope by and large you understand the meaning of neighborhood now, right? So India shares this geography, and for good, for bad, for whatever reason, India has to engage with its neighbors. These are the most important relations that India has. India engages with its neighbors either bilaterally. Bilateral means one-to-one, right? So that's why we will talk about India-Pakistan relations, India-Afghanistan relations, India-Bangladesh relations, India-Bhutan relations, India-Myanmar relations, all right, India-Nepal relations. India also deals with these countries collectively as part of a common collective through organizations like SAARC, BIMSTEC. So we also need to understand India's engagement with SAARC and BIMSTEC, as we need to understand India's relations with these particular countries. So hopefully, by and large, what neighborhood is clear to you. Now, most common questions that I get is this: sir, is China is also a neighbor? I did not deny that China is a neighbor, but I simply said that for the purpose of dealing with the neighborhood, we primarily would focus on South Asia. Policy wise makes sense. This is how it is done policy wise, and this is how we do it here also, right? So let's then understand what are we going to do. When we talk about neighborhood, which is the module 1, we will be talking about India-Pakistan relations. We will be talking about India-Afghanistan relations. We will be talking about India-Bangladesh relations. We will be talking about India-Bhutan relations. We will be talking about India-Nepal relations. And then we will be talking about India-Maldives and India-Sri Lanka relations. When we are done with that, these are bilateral relations. We would be looking at SAARC. We will be looking at the initiative called BBIN, or the initiative like SASEC, South Asia Sub-Regional Economic Cooperation, and we will be looking at BIMSTEC. Alright, we will be looking at BIMSTEC. And once this module 1 is complete, then only we would start with module 2, wherein we will go to China, right? And then module 3 would be South East Asia, right? So in case those of you who are interested in future also, so I have told you that after completing the Pakistan, Afghanistan, Bangladesh, Bhutan, Nepal, Maldives, Sri Lanka, SAARC, BBIN, SASEC neighborhood, we will move towards China, and then after China we will look at Southeast Asia, right? So these are the 3 things that we should be doing, and this is not number of lectures, by the way. These are modules, right? Not number of topics also, because topics within these relations there are many. Now, what will we do in each of these relations? Just to revise, just to repeat, how would we be studying so that it is clear in the first lecture itself? We will look at location, maps, not necessarily in this order. We will look at multiple aspects, but before that we will create a framework for understanding any relation. All right. And then we will look at different aspects, and then we will look at, not necessarily in every lecture, but as much as possible, questions. All right, as much as possible, questions. So that's what we will be doing in each of the lecture, right? So let's then start with India and Pakistan. As I had said, we start with a simple map. Please remember, this is not the official map of India. One thing that we don't do so good is issuing maps of other countries. This is not the official position of India. So some of the regions are used only for practical understanding, right? So this is the map of Pakistan. Can we say that Pakistan is geostrategically significant? Can we say that Pakistan is geostrategically significant? Pakistan is a geostrategically located country, all right? Its location is geostrategically significant. So if you see, of course, we are looking at Pakistan from India, but Pakistan also neighbors Afghanistan. It also neighbors Iran, and it also then has an opening in the Indian Ocean. So it is connecting South Asia with West Asia. It is an important transit route to Afghanistan. It is an important transit route to Central Asia. And it also has close relations with Pakistan, with China, which views it as a conduit to the Indian Ocean, right? So geostrategically located. Location of Pakistan would interest multiple countries, all right, multiple foreign policies. Now if you see Pakistan internally, it has its provinces. Punjab, largest province of Pakistan, economically, demographically. Sindh, a coastal province of Pakistan, also shares a border with India. Punjab also shares a border with India. Sindh, with port city of Karachi in the Indian Ocean. Balochistan, geographically largest province of Pakistan, shares a border with Iran and also Afghanistan, has an opening in the Indian Ocean, and the port of Gwadar, which I know that many of you have heard about, is located in the Balochistan province. This province also is a home to insurgency. Baloch nationalists have claimed that the Pakistani government is exploiting the resources of Balochistan with the use of military force, and this dissatisfaction then has caused a demand for a separate Baloch state, all right? Small, but certainly an insurgency. This is a region on the borders with Afghanistan, which was called FATA, Federally Administered Tribal Areas. This is a region which was called Northwest Frontier Province. Now these two together have been merged and they are called KPK, Khyber Pakhtunkhwa province of Pakistan. Now we are going into a sensitive region. This white portion on the map, as I have shadowed with black color, is called northern areas by Pakistan. India refers to these regions as Gilgit-Baltistan region. Gilgit-Baltistan region is a part of the princely state of Jammu and Kashmir, which had acceded to India. And now Pakistan is in the process of converting Gilgit-Baltistan in its 5th province, which India has opposed. So here, this is what we will call Pakistan occupied Kashmir, including areas of Muzaffarabad, Gilgit-Baltistan, Hunja. All right. Some parts of Jammu and Kashmir are occupied by Pakistan. What does it mean? It means it is not physically in our control. Does that mean that we have let go of the claim? No, that is also not the case. For India, this is an integral part of the Indian Union. Does this mean that we are fighting a war to get it back? Fighting a war perpetually is not possible. So countries do go to war. The state of Jammu and Kashmir was a result of the war that resulted in a ceasefire in 1949, and since then the situation has remained such geographically. But you cannot be fighting wars every day. Wars are costly and generally it is not advised that should be the course that a country should adopt. So this is a situation that you should become comfortable with. Countries have claims and positions. Factually, they may not be the same, right? So Pakistan occupied Kashmir is those part of Jammu and Kashmir which India considers to be part of its sovereign territory, and they remain in illegal occupation of Pakistan, right? So that's basically again what makes Pakistan significant. And then of course close to it is China, right? Let's move on. Let's look at the next map. Again, this map does not represent India's position. It only shows you the same things that we talked about. This is the location of Gwadar Port on Pakistan coast. This is the Karachi port. Karachi is an important commercial city of Pakistan. Now this is the Indus River. The Indus River is the lifeline of Pakistan. If you see, it originates in China, passes through India and then Pakistan, and then it meets the Arabian Sea in Pakistan. The capital of Pakistan is Islamabad. It's a new city. Sometimes you will hear Islamabad-Rawalpindi relations mentioned. So Pakistan's political history has been such that its civilian political leadership has been weaker as compared to military. So Rawalpindi is the military headquarters or general headquarters, GHQs of the Pakistani military, right? So that's where you would hear about Rawalpindi, relations between Rawalpindi and Islamabad. It simply means civil military relations in Pakistan, all right? So then this is one region that I would like to talk about. This is the narrow Wakhan corridor of Afghanistan. Wakhan corridor of Afghanistan has two borders, one between India and Afghanistan and another smallest border of China, Wakhan corridor. This all information to reiterate one fact alone. No matter what you think, no matter what your conception is or confusion is, please remember the answer to the question, does India share a border with Afghanistan, is yes. Alright? Yes. India shares a border with Afghanistan at the Wakhan corridor. Now, the element of confusion. Isn't that area under the occupation of Pakistan? Yes. Physically, we do not control that region, but formally, officially, our position is that entirety of Jammu and Kashmir is part of the Indian Union. So hence that part of Jammu and Kashmir in the Gilgit-Baltistan region, which shares a border with Afghanistan, is also part of India, right? So the answer to that question, no matter what you think, what your confusion is, please remember, does India share a border with Afghanistan or Afghanistan share a border with India? The answer to that question is yes, right? Let's move forward. Let's look at India-Pakistan relations. So what do we call by, what do we mean when we say we will create a framework? We will create a broad idea of a relationship, right? So for example, if I ask you, what do you think is the nature of India-Pakistan relations? By and large, there may be differences, there may be nuances, but most of you are more likely to say that it's a difficult relationship. It's a challenging relationship. And you are right. The second thing that we need to know is that what has been the historical pattern in this relationship? So even if you are not aware of anything, you are aware of the fact that we have fought wars with Pakistan and we have had some talks with Pakistan also. Right? So outstanding issues remain, and there has been a pattern of peace or war. All right, not complete peace, but certainly uneasy peace, but peace and war. So there is a cyclical pattern that we see repeating in this relationship. Then we also need to know, why is it that this relationship is difficult? Why does the cyclical pattern repeat itself? Now, there can be many answers to these questions, but then we need to be aware of a few factors, right? So let's look at them one by one. India-Pakistan relations, as I said, are marked by difficulties. This is how we can write an idea, right? We know that it is a difficult relation, but we cannot answer in one word. So that's why we need to practice writing in sentences. So what can we say? India-Pakistan relations are marked by difficulties. For India, managing relations with Pakistan remains a key foreign policy challenge. In any given scenario, no matter which kind of government is there, how to manage this relationship has always been a challenge. In a way, this relationship has been an obsession of India's foreign policy. The difficulty of this relationship is aptly captured by the term that Mr. Shashi Tharoor uses, right? He has written multiple books on India's foreign policy, including Pax Indica. So he uses the term brother enemy for Pakistan, right? So here is a country which has much in common with India culturally. We look alike, we speak similar languages, our cuisine is similar, and yet we are so far apart that we also have elements of being enemy. Pakistan continuing to harm India's interests is what peeves India. All right. Now, there are a few things that I'd like to make very clear. Anything that you see in black and white starts looking to be important, seems to be important. But please understand, in all these circumstances, in humanities and social sciences, what we are doing is we are trying to put forward arguments. It is not so much a question of correct or incorrect. It is not objective type examination. It is the question of how reasonable is any argument, how reasonable is our claim. So first lesson that you need to keep in mind is this: the answer writing in the examination is not about how correct you are. It is about how reasonable you are, right? It's not about whether you can win a war. By your answer you will win a war against Pakistan or China. It's not about that passion alone. It's about how reasonable you are, how aware you are of why you think the way you think, and then how able you are to put forward your thinking in words. And your thinking also, remember, is not coming from a vacuum. It is coming from what you are reading, right? So look at these lines, right? Sentence 1 gives you a key idea. This is how you should start. Try and start giving away the most important idea. So we are saying that India-Pakistan relations are marked by difficulties. So we have defined it briefly. Now we are saying is, for India, managing relations Pakistan remains a key foreign policy challenge. We started with a brief idea. We opened it up. This is called substantiation. All right. We are saying the same thing, but now bolstering the point. The difficulty of this relationship is aptly captured by Shashi Tharoor when he referred to Pakistan as brother enemy. Again, the same idea, which we could define in one word, difficult. But we are again substantiating it. Now, how are we substantiating it? By using an authority. Somebody like a Shashi Tharoor. It can be according to the Supreme Court, according to Rajya Sabha, according to the World Bank, talking about the language in the examination, right? Quoting an authority. and using a catchy phrase to attract attention. So when we are writing an answer, this is what we are doing. Please understand. Right? So while talking to you in the initial lectures, I generally would like to impart the fundamentals, basics, and then when we are on the same page, we can pick up speed. In the examination situation, don't think that you are going to write all this. You have to pick and choose depending on the word limit. When you are writing an essay, you have more to write. When you are writing a GS answer, you have less to write. So you write for effect. All right, you write for effect. You don't write to display everything that you know. You write to ensure that you have covered most of the things that are asked. Right. So 3 ways of saying the same thing. So we understand now the nature of India-Pakistan relations. It's a difficult relationship. It's a foreign policy challenge. And this relationship involves an element of fraternal ties as well as elements of animosity. Right? Let's move forward. Let's look at the other idea, the pattern in this relationship. Over the years, this relationship is marked by a cyclical pattern, right, wherein violence is repeated. So periods of engagement and dialogue disrupted by violent episodes, right? That's the pattern. What do we mean? Now we are capturing history of this relationship in 4 lines, which is not going to be exhaustive, which is going to leave aside a lot. But from the perspective of the examination, we know that India and Pakistan fought a war in 1948, 1965, 1971, 1999. And even now, 2019 Pulwama is the example of terrorism continuing as an element of violence in this relationship, or the skirmishes on the LOC till last year is an example of violence continuing in this relationship, right? So terrorist attacks Jammu and Kashmir 2001, Parliament building 2001, Mumbai terror attacks 2008, Pathankot, Uri 2016, Pulwama 2019. This is the pattern, right? We also know that between 1948 and 1965, India and Pakistan has had dialogue, the outcome of which was the Indus Water Treaty, 1960. There could have been many agreements, but in each era we can recognize a defining agreement. 1948 until 1965, Indus Water Treaty. 1960. 1965 to 71, Tashkent Agreement, 1966. 1971, after 1972, Shimla Agreement, dialogue. 1999, Kargil War, example of dialogue. Prime Minister Vajpayee visiting Pakistan on a bus, taking a delegation of dignitaries in the expectation of peace. Lahore Declaration is signed, right? So basically, it's a cycle of dialogue, disruption, dialogue, or disruption, dialogue, disruption, right? So this relationship has displayed a pattern of dialogue, disruption and dialogue, or disruption, dialogue and disruption. This is the framework of this relationship. We understand it's a difficult relationship. We understand it remains a foreign policy challenge. We understand that it has displayed a pattern of disruption and dialogue, wherein there have been multiple wars and the scourge of terrorism, which has made India concerned. But there have also been attempts on part of India to make peace with Pakistan. Right? So this is what we call a framework. Now we need to understand why is it difficult and why does this pattern continue, to have some idea as to what should change in the future for the existing scenario to change. All right. So when we understand this, when we have some grasp of the past, we are able to understand what may, and again, mark the word, may work in the future. We cannot predict the future. That is not the job. We may understand the pattern, right? So we certainly know that even after wars, India and Pakistan have fought. So then we know that no matter how it seems, India and Pakistan would talk after a while, right? This year there were some indications. The reason behind the relationship being difficult can be identified through 4 factors. All right, what are these factors? These factors, which are important factors, structural factors, difficult to change factors. I'm not talking about many specific factors or vague factors. I'm talking about structural factors, long-term patterns that need to change. First of all, it is differences in narratives. India and Pakistan have significant differences in political and historical narratives, right? Why was Pakistan created? So let's take that example. Pakistan was created because a certain section had a feeling that the interests of 2 major religious communities on the Indian subcontinent, the Hindus and the Muslims, lie in separate states. And the prominent group among this Muslim League pursued this idea, struggled for creation of a separate state. And the idea was known as the two-state policy, all right, or two-nation theory. Rather than two-state policy, two-nation theory. Now look at India. As India became independent, or even before independence, the then political leadership, did it accept the idea of two-nation? No, because the idea of two-nation theory is antithetical to India's existence, which defines itself to be a plural, secular, diverse republic. Wherein Pakistan was created in the name of religion, still grappling with its identity, and its identity is in a way irreparably damaged if the two-nation theory is rejected. All right. So India has accepted Pakistan as a state, as a historical reality, but not the idea of two-nation theory. This is divergent narrative. What is taught in Pakistan schools or Indian schools, portrayed in media, this is part of that story. What happened? Who was the aggressor? The question of Jammu and Kashmir, question of terrorism. In small or large way, you will find this difference in narrative playing out. So this is the basic reason, one of the basic reasons, differences in narrative, very difficult to bridge. It would require generational change for narrative to change. All right, domestic factors. Now, much has been dictated by the way India and Pakistan have developed as states. Pakistan, for much part, India is a state in the making, Pakistan is a state in the making. India is a nation in the making, Pakistan is a nation in the making, right? Pakistan's however, remains on a much more artificial footing, because one idea was imposed upon a diverse set of people. So this resulted in a political order in Pakistan which has remained ill-defined, prominently defined by the subservient civilian leadership and a strong military. It is also defined by non-state actors having significant sway and say in politics of Pakistan. Some of these non-state actors are sectarian. Some of these non-state actors are violent, and some of these non-state actors are actively anti-India, some. All right. So the weakness of civilian governments in Pakistan vis-a-vis the military, the use of military, the use by the military of non-state actors as well as civilian leaders to promote its interests has meant that the relations have remained difficult. All right, civilian government, whether it wants peace or not, does not want peace, is a different matter, does not have much of a say on India policy in Pakistan, right? Pakistan's military has dominated India policy, and and any military for that matter is for fighting wars. And for fighting wars, you need another thing, which is an enemy. So Pakistan's military has portrayed India as a existential threat, and it has then portrayed itself as the only force, credible force, which can defend Pakistan. Now, these are the domestic factors. Civilian governments, military governments, non-state actors that are difficult for us to change. So that's why in the foreseeable future, the change in India-Pakistan relations would depend on how Pakistan changes, right? The asymmetry and search for strategic parity. What does it mean? Asymmetry simply means a state of inequality of any kind, all right? Asymmetry. So Pakistan, which has been dominated by military, and Pakistan's policy towards India dominated by military establishment, has been consistently sure of one fact, which is that Pakistan is a smaller country as compared to India militarily, economically. If you look at traditional elements of military, the size of military, the aircrafts, etc., economically, the size of economy, demographically, geographically, Pakistan is smaller. Now, the military leadership then has sought strategic parity with India. In what sense? In the sense of very early joining external alliances, right? So Pakistan joined America-led alliances in the 1950s, became an American ally. Even now, Pakistan in a way remains subservient to China. That has been part of Pakistan's quest to seek parity, equality with India. Development of nuclear weapons by a poor country like Pakistan is also part of its search for that equality, that parity, right? So asymmetry and search for strategic parity, meaning traditionally speaking, in traditional military sense, or economically speaking, demographically or geographically speaking, Pakistan remains unequal, and Pakistan's military leadership has sought to bridge this gap by either seeking external alliances or by adopting means such as development of nuclear weapons. So again, this is something that continues to drive, to be a factor in this relationship. And the role of external actors. Now the location of Pakistan means that today, tomorrow, and for a long time, Pakistan's location would be of interest to multiple countries. In the past, it is the United States which strengthened Pakistan. Today, it is China which supports Pakistan. So India's efforts at changing the behavior of Pakistan through pressure or through by isolating Pakistan would not be successful or would be limited because of the role of external actors. So we can say that difficulty in India-Pakistan relations arises from differences in narratives, domestic factors such as ascendance of military and weakness of civilian government and rise of non-state actors in Pakistan, the existing asymmetry and Pakistan's military's attempt to search for parity with India, which drives the policy, and the role of external actors who see Pakistan to be useful for their purpose, right? So these are some of the reasons that we can see for this pattern, for this difficulty to continue. Sir, when India launched, again, this is going way ahead, way ahead. We are not talking about look east, act east, but still there is a question. I'll take this question, right? Right question at the right time. When India launched its Act East policy in 2014, which was different from the Look East policy of 1991, is it geostrategy or geopolitics? Sumit, this is a hypothetical question, first of all. Second of all, not all terms would be used in this way, that what is this and what is that? What is Act East policy? Right? The usage of such terms has to be determined by where are you reading them. Look how a writer has written about it, how a newspaper article has written about these terms. So broadly, I'd explain to you that geostrategy would mean the direction of foreign policy, right? Geography and foreign policy, direction of foreign policy. So Act East policy largely would be a part of geostrategy, long-term interest of India towards its east, and to follow that a dedicated policy, all right? Part of foreign policy, Act East. It's an act of geostrategy. Southeast Asia is geostrategically important, and geopolitical developments in Southeast Asia are of interest to India. That's an answer to your question to the best of my ability. So again, today we will stop here, and in the next class we will continue discussing Pakistan and then Afghanistan and then Bangladesh. All right. So that is how we will continue. What would happen in the next class is the same. By and large, send your questions after the break, right? We will take 5 minutes break in the class. So in the break, if you have any questions, please send them. And towards the end of the class and the beginning of the class, if you have any questions. So we'll start every class by seeking questions if there are any. Break is the middle of the class where we will be seeking questions, and then end of the class is where you should be asking questions. So this is what we will be doing, and we will be now continuing with these relations one by one. That is how we will move, right? So hopefully by and large, today's class has created some degree of familiarity between me, my style, and you. You understand yourself. You have seen what we are doing. Now you have to understand your needs. If you have needs, identify them, forward the questions, right? Raise doubts. But again, as I have said, patience, listening have to be virtues. Secondly, as I have noted down, please avoid counterfactuals and hypotheticals, right? As much as possible. But still, you can send questions. I will keep taking them on. Through questions, I'll tell you what generally is a counterfactual, what generally is not relevant. Your questions are most welcome. So thank you very much for your time and patience. Please stay safe. We will be meeting tomorrow, and then we will be continuing with this topic and the topics decided.